They wanted you to believe Kelly Rowland was just the other girl in Destiny's Child, a backup singer, a sidekick. But what if I told you that was never the truth? The music industry didn't just overlook Kelly. They made sure she stayed in Beyoncé's shadow. Why? Because she had the talent, the charisma, and the star power to be just as big, maybe even bigger. But the moment she tried to break free, the industry fought back. Family drama, industry politics, and a career-defining power move that changed everything. This is the untold story of Kelly Rowland. And trust me, it's not the fairy tale they sold you. From the outside, Kelly Rowland's rise to fame looked like a dream come true. She was young, talented, and handpicked to be part of one of the biggest girl groups in history. But what people don't realize is that her journey started with survival, not stardom. Kelly was born Calendria Train Rowland on February 11th, 1981, in Atlanta, Georgia. But her childhood, far from glamorous. Her father, Christopher Lovett, was an alcoholic, and domestic abuse ran rampant in their home. Kelly's mother, Doris, made a life-changing decision. She packed up their lives and left. Just like that, Kelly's father was gone, and she and her mother moved to Houston, Texas, searching for a fresh start. And that's where everything changed. At just 7 years old, Kelly moved in with a family that would define the rest of her life. The Knowles family. Yes, that Knowles family. Matthew and Tina Knowles took her in, raising her alongside their own daughter, Beyoncé. Now, let's be clear, this wasn't some overnight Cinderella story. Kelly wasn't instantly treated like a superstar in the making. Instead, she was thrust into a world where one thing was obvious. There was always a favorite. When Kelly and Beyoncé, along with a few other girls, formed the group Girls Time, it was clear who was being positioned as the lead. Matthew Knowles, a former salesman turned manager, had one mission: make Beyoncé a superstar. And Kelly, she was there. Talented? Yes. Beautiful, of course. But the industry and even people around her started to see her as Beyoncé's sidekick rather than her equal. By the time Destiny's Child officially debuted in 1997, the narrative was already set. Beyoncé was the star. Kelly was the best friend. And the other members? Expendable. The music videos, the performances, the interviews, it was all orchestrated to push one message. Beyoncé in the front, Kelly in the background. And the worst part, people believed it. But here's the truth. Kelly was never just the backup. In fact, her voice was carrying more of those Destiny's Child songs than you realize. And the industry knew it. Here's what they don't tell you. Kelly Rowland was just as vital to Destiny's Child's success as Beyoncé. Think about it. When you hear Say My Name or Survivor, who do you think is doing all the heavy lifting? Beyoncé? Not entirely. Kelly's voice wasn't just a background harmony. It was front and center, driving some of Destiny's Child's biggest hits. In fact, there are times when fans have mistaken Kelly's vocals for Beyoncé's. That's how similar their tones were, and that's how much Kelly was doing behind the scenes. Let's break it down. On Bugaboo, Kelly takes the first verse, not Beyoncé. On Survivor, Kelly's harmonies carry the song's signature, powerful, anthem-like sound. And on Dilemma, her solo smash hit with Nelly, Kelly proved she could hold her own without Destiny's Child and without Beyoncé. And let's talk about Dilemma for a second. This wasn't just some random feature. It was a cultural phenomenon. The song topped the Billboard Hot 100 for 10 weeks straight. It won a Grammy Award. It went platinum worldwide. And the biggest kicker? It was bigger than anything Beyoncé had put out solo at the time. For the first time, Kelly Rowland wasn't just the other girl in Destiny's Child. She was a global superstar in her own right. And this should have been the moment that launched Kelly into the same level of superstardom as her best friend. But the industry wasn't about to let that happen. See, Matthew Knowles was still managing Kelly's career, and the moment she started to shine too much, things got complicated. Her next album, poorly promoted, her follow-up singles, overshadowed. Even though she had the talent, the stats, and the fan base, the industry continued to push the narrative that she was simply Beyoncé's support act. But here's where things take a turn, because Kelly wasn't about to stay in anyone's shadow forever, and that's when she made the biggest power move of her career, firing Matthew Knowles. Kelly Rowland firing Matthew Knowles should have been the start of her real breakout as a solo artist. Instead, it exposed just how much power he and the industry had over her career. See, Matthew Knowles wasn't just a manager. He was a gatekeeper. He didn't just run Destiny's Child, he controlled everything around it. Who got what songs? Who got the most camera time? Who got the best styling? And most importantly, who got to be a star? Former Destiny's Child members like LaToya Luckett and Latavia Robertson spoke out about how Matthew's favoritism made the group toxic. They accused him of running the group like a dictatorship, one where Beyonce was always the priority. And Kelly, she was right under his control too. For years, people assumed that Kelly had the same opportunities as Beyonce. But behind the scenes, her solo career was sabotaged before it even started. Her first album, Simply Deep, 2002, had success but was under-promoted. Her second album, Ms. Kelly, 2007, was delayed multiple times and label executives barely supported it. Her music was often given a smaller budget, fewer resources, and less attention than Beyonce's. Coincidence? Not really. Industry insiders have whispered for years that as long as Kelly was under Matthew's management, she was never going to be allowed to shine as bright as Beyonce. Because here's the thing, Kelly had the star power. She had already proven she could succeed on her own. But the industry, and the people controlling her career, wanted to keep her in check. And then, in 2009, Kelly did the unthinkable. She cut ties with Matthew Knowles. For the first time, she was free. No more being controlled, no more being overshadowed. But breaking free from the Beyonce machine came with a price. Suddenly, Kelly wasn't getting the same industry support she once had. Labels weren't pushing her music as hard. Radio play wasn't as strong. Major endorsements weren't coming in the same way. She went from a Grammy-winning, chart-topping artist to someone the industry seemed to be treating as an afterthought. And yet, Kelly kept moving. Instead of trying to compete in Beyonce's lane, she reinvented herself completely. She pivoted into dance music, a move that would change her career forever. When Kelly Rowland fired Matthew Knowles in 2009, the industry watched closely. Some thought it was career suicide. How do you walk away from the man who built Destiny's Child? But Kelly wasn't just walking away. She was taking control. And her next move, completely unexpected. Instead of sticking to R&B and competing directly with Beyonce, Kelly flipped the script and pivoted into dance music. In 2009, she teamed up with David Guetta for the track When Love Takes Over. At first, no one expected much. After all, Kelly was known for R&B, not club anthems. But then, the song exploded. #1 in 10 countries. Double platinum sale. Critics calling it one of the greatest dance tracks of all time. This was huge. Not only was Kelly proving she could dominate without Destiny's Child, but she was now outshining most mainstream pop stars in the dance genre. And most importantly, Beyonce had never done this. For the first time, Kelly Rowland had something Beyonce didn't. A global dance smash that put her at the top of the charts in ways that R&B hadn't before. This wasn't just a hit, it was a statement. Kelly was not Beyonce's backup. She was her own artist. But she wasn't stopping there. She doubled down on this new sound, teaming up with DJs and producers across Europe. While R&B fans in the US were still stuck on the idea of Kelly being Beyonce's best friend, she was becoming a full-blown pop star internationally. And then in 2011, she dropped Motivation, featuring Lil Wayne. And that's when people finally woke up. The song hit #1 on the Billboard R&B charts. It became one of the biggest R&B songs of the year, and suddenly, people saw Kelly as a force of her own. Even Beyonce's mom, Tina Knowles, publicly praised Kelly, saying she had finally stepped into her own. But let's be real, Kelly had always been her own star. The industry just never wanted to admit it. Still, Kelly's success didn't come without obstacles. Even with platinum records, Grammy wins, and a growing international fan base, the industry kept treating her like an underdog. Why? Because Kelly had dared to leave the Beyoncé machine and they weren't about to make it easy for her. But Kelly was done waiting for their approval. Now she was making moves on her own terms. And that meant finally confronting the past, including the man who had abandoned her as a child. For years, Kelly Rowland carried a secret weight, a wound that fame, money, and even success couldn't heal. Her father was a ghost in her life. Christopher Lovett had been absent for decades. After Kelly's mother Doris left their toxic marriage, Kelly never saw him again. At first, she was fine with it. After all, she had the Knowles family, a new home, a new life. But as she got older, that emptiness never really went away. She admitted in interviews that growing up without a father gave her serious trust issues, especially when it came to relationships with men. She constantly felt like she wasn't enough. Not in love, not in her career, not even in her own mind. But she never let it show. Kelly was the smiling, soft-spoken, sweet one, while Beyoncé was seen as the dominant force. Kelly played the role of the chill, humble best friend. And for years, she thought that's who she had to be. Until one day, she realized she needed answers. She was a grown woman now with a child of her own, and something inside her told her it was time to finally face the past. So she did the unthinkable. She tracked down her father, and this wasn't just some emotional reunion for TV cameras. This was real, raw, and terrifying. When she finally saw him again, her body froze. In her mind, she had so many things she wanted to say. Why weren't you there? Did you ever look for me? Did you ever care? But the moment she looked at him, something changed. She saw his age, his pain, his regret, and just like that, her anger melted away. She let him talk for 2 hours straight. For the first time, she listened. He told her about his struggles, his mistakes, the demons that kept him away. And for the first time in her life, Kelly saw the full picture. It didn't make everything okay. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave her something she never thought she'd have: closure. She later admitted that for years, she'd been setting up emotional walls to protect herself. But deep down, all she really wanted was to be loved. And that realization, it changed everything. Because Kelly finally understood she didn't need to prove herself to anyone. Not the industry, not the fans, not even her own father. She was enough. But life wasn't done testing her yet. Because just as she was healing, tragedy struck. By 2023, Kelly Rowland had built a career that stood on its own. She was a Grammy-winning artist, actress, TV personality, and businesswoman. But despite all her accomplishments, the world still had a way of reminding her that, in their eyes, she was never meant to be the star. And this time, it happened on one of the biggest stages in the world, the Cannes Film Festival. Kelly arrived at Cannes looking like pure royalty. Draped in a stunning red gown, she commanded attention, cameras flashing as she gracefully made her way up the iconic staircase. But then, something shifted. A security guard rushed her up the stairs, physically blocking her from taking her moment. At first, Kelly kept it cool, but when the guard continued to push her forward, dismissing her like she wasn't supposed to be there, she snapped. And rightfully so. She turned to the guard, pointed her finger, and with a look that said, "Don't play with me," she let it be known she was not going to be disrespected. The moment was caught on camera and instantly went viral. The internet erupted. Some called it a queen standing her ground. Others said it was a blatant example of racial bias. People noticed that white actresses were allowed to take their time on the carpet, posing for as long as they wanted, while Kelly was rushed off like an afterthought. Later, Kelly spoke out saying, "There were other women on that carpet who did not look like me, who did not get scolded or pushed off or told to get in line." And she wasn't wrong. This moment wasn't just about Kelly. It was about how Black women are still treated differently in high-profile spaces, even when they've earned their place at the table. Kelly didn't back down. She stood her ground, showing the world that she was no longer that quiet, overlooked girl from Destiny's Child. She was a powerhouse, and she was done being pushed aside. And honestly, the industry should have seen this coming, because Kelly Rowland has spent her whole career proving people wrong. And despite everything, she's still standing. Kelly Rowland's story is not one of luck, it's one of resilience. For decades, she was painted as the other girl in Destiny's Child, the supporting act in someone else's fairy tale. But she refused to stay in anyone's shadow. She broke free from the Beyoncé machine, fired the manager who controlled her career, and reinvented herself in a way no one saw coming. She dominated pop, R&B, dance music, and reality TV, proving she wasn't just a former girl group member. She was a multi-faceted powerhouse. And despite the industry trying to hold her back, she sold over 40 million records worldwide, won 4 Grammy Awards, had multiple #1 hits, both as a solo artist and with Destiny's Child, became an actress, a judge on talent shows, and a respected businesswoman, built a $30 million empire, on her own terms. But even more than the money and the accolades, Kelly proved something much bigger, that she was never just a backup, that her talent, voice, and success were hers alone, and that no matter how many times people tried to overlook her, underestimate her, or push her aside, she would always rise. So if you ever hear someone call Kelly Rowland Beyoncé's best friend, correct them, because she's been a star all along, and now the world is finally waking up to that fact.